Yes, way too much up, much easier. What we do different, also how we change this is, if you look at the plans, you've got the main spar going across, and then you would flocks on ribs on the end of that spar. You glue them, they'd be kind of hanging out there. And what you'd have is, you'd have a rib like this, and the leading edge front part like this, and you would have like a little notch in here where the top skin would sit on top of here. And with each rib in the plans, it would say put a bulkhead in between each rib. Yeah, but not those, but if you look at this picture, this rib would continue on. The curve the leading edge would be out here. And what we've done is, we've cut those all off right there at that edge of where you see the plan is, where there's a notch. And the reason why we do that is because, would you build a ladder? If you're going to build a ladder, and you have your rungs, your steps, would you build a ladder with each of those steps and put a block in between each one of them on each side? That ladder would kind of look like this, wouldn't it? You would just put one long piece on each side, an upright on each side, and then put your rungs, right? Well, they want you to do the plans of building a ladder. Here's a rib, here's a rib, here's a rib, here's a rib. Let's put a block in between each one. So what we've done is we've cut all of those ribs, those little leading edges off, and put one bulkhead that goes all the way from this end all the way to the fuselage. You take drywall screws and screw it on here temporarily on this end here. So now you're making this ladder this way, which makes it easier when you go to finishing it, because if you go by the plans, your rib is here and here and here. There's a block in your headers, your bulkheads in between. And the reason why they do that in the plans is, each one of those nibs, you're supposed to put a block of foam in between each one of those, and then use this nib here as a guide to sand that shape. Well, let's see, if you've got this a little crooked and everything else, and now you're using those as the shape, and then you're trying to sand those, you can see where it's like building a house if you haven't made it plumb and square. Everything else is going to be one messed up thing. So when it comes time to put that leading edge on the front of this, it's real simple. You take a hot wire, take a piece of blue foam, and you cut one solid piece of the leading edge. You take that piece of blue foam, put some micro on it, and slap it on there and glue it right on there. And it's absolutely perfect, quick and easy, no chasing things down the road.
And the shape of that leading edge is the same all the way down the strake, right?
All the way would be all the way down the straight.
Right.
Now, doing the coated. Now, if you end up electing to do the Girrrl Strake, that little extension, and the reason why people do that is because if you've ever sat in one of these planes, you're sitting like this up against the longeron. Well, now what you can do is, and some people, depending upon your body height and everything, would have problems with the longeron and camping and all that. So if you can imagine, all of a sudden, if you get to do this, and your shoulder has dropped down a little bit, it's not in, and so it's like you've got an easy chair for that little bit of space that you've added, so that inside can be all opened up. Where we came up with this was, we're doing Infinity retractable main gear. In order to run, we have the hydraulic pump up front, and in order to run those hydraulic lines, it would have gone all the way down the fuselage and then down the main spar, which, going across the leading edge, instead of this way, we cut 40 inches of line. And nobody's ever has done hanger rash or anything else in the strake area. You know, it's always on the wing, so nobody's ever damaged this area. So, because what we did was we put our hydraulic lines on the front edge of this bulkhead. So when we put that that our leading edge styrofoam cap on the front there. It's just hollowed out for all our hydraulic lines. And that's kind of how it kind of came to be. So what we did was, if you can imagine, if you made this bulkhead and it went completely straight across, okay, so you continue that, all your ribs are flat like this, and you cut them off, and you went from this corner all the way to straight, all the way to the fuselage. And I should have a picture here. Somewhere like that. Well, here's hydraulic lines in the front of that, and it's been glassed before I hot wire the blue foam on there.
The rib, the leading edge.
Yes.
You got a template, so you cut out the leading edge for here, and you cut out the the leading edge for here, and use that. So you cut your foam, so that's your guide, your template for
Yes,
cutting that leading
just like-
edge.
yeah, just like you would do
these two are not the same size, I don't think.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, he asked about that.
Exactly. Well,
Okay, but I want to make sure.
basically, no, this is the same.
I mean,
Well,
this-
kind of.
Same leading
It's a
edge
little
all the
bit,
way?
Yes, same all the way. Now, when you do this leading edge, this looks more blunt. It looks more blunt, but there's no such thing. You know how if you look in the plans, it'll say, "Oh, do this to a pleasing shape." Well, this
That's
is
always a good one.
yes.
That's always good.
There's no such thing as a pleasing shape in that area, because if I take a template, and go right to this leading edge of this part of the strake, get straight into the wind, and I make a template like this and cut that shape should be exactly, if I go here, that shape should be exactly the same as this, into the wind, right? What the wind is seeing. So, since this is at this angle, this looks kind of more blunt. It's a lot tighter radius,
Right.
and it almost looks fatter in a way, but it's the exact same thickness as this spar, as this strake is. But when you look at it, it looks proper. You don't know why. When you look at things, sometimes you don't know that something's not quite right. And this is one of those things. Now, if you look at the Stagger Easy, most people have seen the Stagger Easy. There's only one flaw in that design. And when I pointed it out, actually pointed out to Steve, if you look at the strake, he had like a extension, Cozy Girl type of thing like this. And when you look at it, it was flat, it was all proper, all the way, and then when it got to here, he flattened it all out. It kind of flattened it, and it looked like it was dented, you might say. Well, he didn't continue that radius as if he put a template on that all the way. And he goes, oh my God, And when if I point it out to you, you'll go, then it's just like my shirt. It really stands out. But there's no such thing as a pleasing shape here. It should be the same all the way. And what we use for that template, for that leading edge there, is this baggage pod rib. We use that very same rib and just use a piece of foam, the shape of it, and we glue it onto the side of the fuselage. So then when we put our top skin across, like in the plans, you've got to have like a ledge. Here's the fuselage. Here's your ribs. You've got to have a kind of a partial rib on the side here so that, or foam, so that when you have your top skin, it's just not hanging, flopping in the wind.
And it's got something to rest on.
It's got something to rest on. So we're using the same rib as this one here, the baggage pod on this side of the fuselage. So what we do is, and it's in here somewhere, I can't. When we do this, we're going to make another bulkhead the same thickness as the other bulkheads there. And we continue that on.
You have an album online, it's all these pictures.
No, there's some things. Okay, I'm stupid. Okay, see how this is. I've done the hat sections here. Okay, and I'll show you how this sounds. It's just got a bulkhead that goes straight across. Here's all your ribs, and I cut the leading edges off of the ribs, and it goes straight across all the way. That's how that would normally look. Then what I did was I took the same piece of bulkhead, same thickness, and I went from that data point right there at that intersection, right at the center of that rib, and I went from there, and where this here bulkhead should stop is so that where your instrument panel is right here. So I could get something from the back side of my instrument panel, and I could put a straw tube or whatever on the face of that, on this side, so that I ran a pull string in there on the back side of my panel, instrument panel, so I could put a wire in there, and I can get wire
Do it in there.
Yes, so I can put stuff in here, like I'm putting my
Bangers.
Yes, no, your no, the for gauge centers.
Antennas.
I can't think. It's from my brain. You got to keep it away from metal. Keep it away from
Magnetometer.
Yeah, keep the magnets. That's a great spot to keep your magnetometers away from metal and everything else, power and all that. So I could run this, and there'd be little shelves up underneath. So, but if I wanted LED lighting and I wanted something, how do you get wires back in that baggage compartment? So anyway, I eventually put my hydraulic pump up here for my retractable gear. My hydraulic lines went on the back side of the instrument panel, went on the leading edge all the way down because my gear is at the end of the spar, main spar. Okay, so the idea is putting where this bulkhead should go is to where you could drill a hole on the other side of your bulkhead and do something. Okay, that's where it would be. When you actually put your leading edge on here, your foam, it extends farther than that because of that curve, then it makes it even look a little bit longer. So where this curves, it's fairly close to your canard where it starts. So it looks, it looks like it's going fast on the ground. Anyway, this ends up being a temporary. I just drywall screw that to the fuselage when I glue this to here to here. Then this piece here, I glass this on because I'm going to cut this piece out later after I get the bottom skin eventually, and you don't get in a rush to put the bottom skin on. Let's see. Here's kind of a little bit. When I put the bottom, this was after I've already done all my stuff, my hat sections and everything else. Then I eventually put my bottom skin. Once you put your bottom skin on, you're stuck. You can't do anything more. up on top because you can't get access to it. Okay, so you can see what I did was, once I got my bottom skin glassed on there, once I got it on there, then I went ahead and I cut that out, that little temporary bulkhead that was supporting all of this, and cut my hole on the inside and run my glass on the inside of the floor over to the inside of the tub there and everything else. Okay.
Do you run your wiring out for like your lights and?
No, because that's run down your wing. You have holes in your wing.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with any of that. This was only for my hydraulic lines.
Okay.
I didn't want to run them down the fuselage and then down the spar this way. I actually cut 40 inches of tubing off. So what I actually did here was a little different, and you could do this if you think it through. If you look at the plans on your doing your strakes, normally it has a rib that goes diagonal right here and all of that, and that has to be there. Okay, that all has to be there. That doesn't change. But since I've got retracts back here and all of this, what I did do was, instead of having, normally after you've done your strakes and everything else and your wings, then that one little section, you would take a piece of urethane foam or whatever, stick it in there and try to blend that into the actual wing, straight into the wing. So what I did instead was, I had my fuselage, I had my main spar attached, I had my wings done, I took my wings, bolted them to the spar on both ends, and then I made a piece of bulkhead material, a flat piece of, bulkhead, so big, and I took that, ougered out the one end so I could flox it right on the very end of my spar, up against my wing. And then I just took a pencil and traced the rib on my wing, and then unbolted the wing, and then cut that rib out, and then just floxed it right on there. So now I have a rib at the very end, and it matches my wing. And then I went from there and went all the way straight across. So I eliminated a process, and technically it's, would you rather have a rib at the end versus, and it weighs nothing.
Well, yesterday I talked to Robert about that little end part of the straight, and I asked him, I said, well, the plants say you fill up all full of foam and everything.
Yes.
And I asked him how necessary is that. He said it's not necessary. As a matter of fact, you can go ahead and leave it open, and you can put another gallon or so of fuel in there.
You could do that and do something different, but that support, that bulkhead that's going diagonally,
You still need the support.
that's critical. As a matter of fact, when Infinity and different ones were doing changes, Bert got involved in that. This is critical to this wing, or to this construction and everything else. So, but like I said, if you just think it through, this is an easy way. Otherwise, you could just go from this rib versus this here, and then just put this bulkhead going straight across. Okay. Now, doing the strakes, whether you do this Cozy Girrrl Strake extension or not, has nothing to do with really, and that's what I'm really teaching here, is doing the hat sections on top of these ribs. So the plans say you've got a rib, you take, put a 2-ply bid tape down on the table, a strip, let it go off, harden, peel it off the table, and take your rib and take that flat piece, 2-inch wide piece of glass, and glue it right on top of that rib, a flat spot. And then when you go to put your skin on top of this, you put flocks on top of there and you glue it to that flat. Well, I'm sure there's some people that don't ouger out a bulkhead. You know how you just ouger out the foam right inside the bulkhead, and then when you do that, you're supposed to get the micro off the glass on each side where it was micro, because you want to glass to glass with the flocks. There were some people that, they just put some flocks on top of the foam and they just glue this. So it's structurally crappy. Even if you flocks, this hat section on there, it's just flocks. It is a glass in so much ways. But it's flat. So if you get into a compound curve, especially if you're doing this here, those can get, what they would say is when you go to do your leading edge, you would put those strips on your ribs, but there was no way of putting that on the leading edge, where you have your ribs and the bulkheads in between. What the plans say is take some flocks and butter it across that bulkhead going across, and lay that top skin glue that top skin right on top of there, and you just got flocks there. There's no glass, there's no nothing, and you're hoping that you won't have a leak right there. Probably 80% of all those planes out there have got a leak. You don't find out until many, many, many years later, because it takes a long time for the fuel to absorb into the foam, and finally gravity takes it down to the bottom, and then you eventually start seeing a blister. You'll start seeing, and most of them in their time will eventually do that. And then your plane ends up being heavier because now all your foam is fuel soaked and everything else. They used to say, oh, well, we don't worry about leaking and everything else because, we've done our best on the inside, and then you've got the outside skin that's your last line of defense. It will just keep going, and
Because of wicks.
yes, exactly. And it's amazing how porous glass is anyway when you go to do things. So by doing this way, I can put a hat section on the leading edge and on the trailing edge back where the main spar is. So I'm basically using the same amount of glass, but now it's structurally, I'm literally glassing my top skin on. So it's much stronger, but the odds of you having a leak are probably, you're probably more like 90% or 95% or better that you're not going to have a leak, versus you're probably 80% positive that you are going to have a leak. Okay, so what we do is in the plans, they would say, you make your top skin, take a sheet of foam, glass at one side, and then you lay it on top of your strake there, and then you would cut some cuts in it so you can curve it around there and everything else. So when you make your top skin, to get it to go around that leading edge, you're supposed to, in the plans, take a razor knife, cut slits in the foam, and people always end up, you don't realize it, that you'll actually score sometimes the glass, and it would say cut an inch wide or so. Well, we do it maybe a 1/4 inch wide, because each one is a facet. So we do that, but and then they would say, do that, and then put it on your top of your strakes, and then take some wood and glue it on top of your foam, which is going to pop it off later. Glue it up to hold its shape and everything else. You don't have to do any of that. You just cut you've got your skin on top of there. You got all your lines cut, and to hold that shape, what we do is in fact,